Hey guys, I'm back. We are talking today about how to launch a business when you still have a job. It's one of the most common questions I get asked. People are like, I'm still working. I don't feel confident enough to just jump off the ledge and start my business and quit my job at the same time. But I'm also exhausted at the end of the day. So how do I plan a business while I still have a job? And this is something that not only did I do for myself, but I help my clients do as well. So I wanted to give you kind of my roadmap for how I did it, how I recommend other people do it. It's a little bit of a precursor for what you'll find in my Side Hustle Starter Kit online course. But it's just a little bit of an overview and how the steps that I would take if I were doing it again. I made some mistakes along the way, so I'm giving you kind of the roadmap minus the mistakes of how I would get started building my business while still having a job, because the key here is you have leverage when you are still working, right? You have financial stability, you have contacts, you have access to things that you might not have access to when you quit. So it's really, really important to set yourself up for success while you're still working, so that when you do eventually, if the end goal is for you to eventually quit and run your business full time, which isn't for everyone. So don't, if that's not the goal for you, if your business truly is going to be a side hustle, take that with a grain of salt. But if the goal is for you to run your business full time, taking advantage of the things that you have access to when you have a job, including money, is really key. So there are 5 or 6 things that I would do that I kind of check off the list that we're going to run through today. And I'm going to do it pretty quick. I'll try to make this a fairly short video, but I also am going to link some resources below. So if you are interested in the business planning aspect of it, I did a webinar for what I call Business Planning 101, and it is essentially about how to finish the year strong. I love talking about business planning in October. You've heard me say this before. So many people sleep through November, December, and blame it on the holidays and the slow season and all of that. I want you to use it as a springboard for the coming year. So if you're interested in that, I'll link to that below. And there's also a couple other resources that I'll put down there. But other than that, we'll jump right in. I'll do a quick introduction if you're new around here. My name is Brett Rowley. I am a business consultant, a marketing strategist. I love both of those things, business and marketing, and I talk about it a lot. And I talked about it so much that I created an online course. It's called the Side Hustle Starter Kit. It's basically everything that I would tell someone that was just getting started, and how to create their business from launch to finances to products and services, whatever you can imagine, it's all in there. So a little bit about me, but let's jump in and talk about how to launch a business while you have a job. The first thing, and I think this is the most important, I'm big into accountability, and the first thing that you need to do is to give yourself a deadline. Who has been around people that are like, yeah, I have this great idea for a business, here's everything that I have planned, and then you see them again 2 years later and still nothing. I see it all the time. I have clients that do it, and I think the biggest thing is giving yourself a deadline. The second biggest thing is telling people about that deadline. Because if you're anything like me, I absolutely hate failure. Failure is the biggest thing that I struggle with, is that fear of failure. And if I give myself a deadline and I tell people and I'm like, hey, I'm launching a business on March 1st, I will do everything in my power to make sure that that business gets launched, because I've put myself out there. And I know that's scary, but that fear is a good thing. That's a healthy fear, because what it's going to do, it's going to motivate you when you are tired after work and you don't want to work on the business piece. When you have other plans, more fun plans on the weekend that you would rather go out and do them and you don't want to stay in and work. So give yourself a deadline and tell people what that deadline is and hold yourself accountable. The second thing that deadline is going to help you do is it's going to help you set a schedule. And this is how you're going to be able to take steps forward in your business. It's super intimidating, right? When you're like, oh, I'm going to start a business, but I have a full-time job. Like, I need 36 hours in the day instead of 24. It's really, really intimidating. So start by setting a schedule, because launching a business is hard. And you're going to have the discipline to come home from the office, avoid the couch, avoid Netflix, avoid the wine for the most part, and get back to work. So setting a schedule where everything is mapped out really clearly is really key. And I want your schedule to be realistic, but I also want it to be aggressive. So think about this launch phase. So launching a business while you still have a job. Think about it as a short-term sprint. It's not a sustainable model. So if you say, okay, I'm going to launch my business in March, for the next 4 months, I'm going to get up 2 hours earlier so I can work on my business before work. I'm going to work 4 hours when I get home, and so that way I can get 6 hours a day on my business alone. That is not sustainable long term. But if you have that end goal in sight, you can make it happen. And what it's going to do is it helps you avoid wasting time, and it keeps you from becoming that person that is still talking about their business 2 years later and hasn't taken any concrete steps forward. You know you're going to grind for those 3 or 4 months, but then at the end, there's going to be a reward for that, and you can adjust your schedule accordingly. The other thing to do when it comes to your schedule is be kind to yourself. Allow some grace. If there are days that you just can't make it happen, that's fine. Just bounce back the next day and get it done. All right. The third thing, if you are launching a business while you still have a job, create an action-based checklist. So if you've read any of my stuff, if you know anything about me, you know I am all about taking action. I think that it's the number one differentiator in business. And it sounds obvious. Obviously, Brett, action is important in business, but you would be surprised the number of business owners that plan and don't take action. So the key here, you're going to create a checklist. When you're brainstorming, you sit down that first time you're getting started working, you're going to create a checklist of everything that needs to get done, from branding to marketing to product development to finances to customer outreach. Think about all the things that need to get done. Make a massive list. Take a deep breath. Don't panic once you see the list. Then you're going to go back, and for each one of those things on the list, create action-based tasks that are going to drive you that direction. So ask yourself, what is the next step that I need to take in order to get there? The example that I always use, because for me it was the most intimidating piece of building my business, was my website. The difference between looking at a to-do list and seeing build a website on your to-do list. If I have an hour after work and I see the next thing on my to-do list is build a website, I'm gonna be like, oh shit, I don't even know where to start. I only have an hour. That seems totally unrealistic. But if you break that task down into action-based little checklists that you can create, buy a domain, set up hosting, write your website copy, source images, connect to a MailChimp. If you break it down into things that the next step that you have to take, it's so much more attainable. So that way you can make the most of the time you have in your schedule. Say, okay, I have 10 minutes at work at the end of my lunch break. I finished eating. I'm going to knock something out real quick. Don't get fired because you're working on your business at work. But that way you have those tasks that you can just it's a slow march towards completion, instead of kind of feeling overwhelmed by, oh my God, I have to build a website, or I have to talk to a trademark lawyer. First you got to find a lawyer, then you need to set a meeting. Break them down, and it seems infantile to kind of break them down into that small of tasks, but it makes it so much more attainable, and you'll make much more progress in that way. It's much less daunting. The third thing, I think I'm on 3. The third thing that I want you to do if you are starting a business while you still have a job is make connections. So understand that this time that you are working, whether or not you're in the industry that your business ultimately is going to be in, make connections and use the leverage that you have as an employee of that company to get as much out of it as you possibly can. That could be in terms of potential clients. That could be in terms of education that you have access to while you're still at your company. That could be in terms of just informational interviews. Saying, hey, sit down with your boss and say, how did you get to the point where you are? Glean as much information as you possibly can from your current job to use in your business. I did when I quit my job, the only reason I was able to was because I had built relationships with clients and I knew that they were going to follow me when I left. Now that's a tricky kind of transition. So be careful if you have a non-compete or if you have other things. But I knew that when I left my company, I had made the connections that I needed to be successful in my business. So that would have completely been gone if I had jumped too soon. So while you're still there, make connections. Especially if you work for a big brand that's impressive to people. If I worked at Nike or Google or any of these massive brands, the access that gets you into influencers, inboxes, even just say, hey, I work at Nike, or I work at wherever. I've got Nike stuck in my head now. I can't think of other examples, but I work here. Can I chat with you for a second and kind of identify how you can use that to your advantage? The fourth one is a big one, and that is to plan financially. And for most entrepreneurs, this is the scariest part of ultimately leaving your business, is because you're losing that paycheck. It's super scary. Been there, totally get it. It takes some guts to do. If you are smart, the key here is to plan ahead of time. So I like to, ideally, with my clients, I like to tell them to have a 3-month runway. So before they quit their job, I want you to have 3 months that if you make absolutely nothing in your new business, you're going to be able to pay your bills. And that's minimum. And if you have a business that is going to be kind of a slower developing business, then that time period is going to extend. But minimum, I like to have a 3-month runway. While you're still employed, start to think about your salary as business income. And what I mean by that is set aside a piece of your salary, as much as you possibly can. Not only are you saving for that 3-month window, but set aside separately as much as you can to be your business, your business funds, because it costs money to start a business. And so the quicker you can start to siphon off some of your salary to go towards the business, the better off you're going to be. The other thing that I will remind people about is tax implications when you start your business. So when you start to make some money, so say you're running your business on the side, you're still employed, don't forget, do not use all of that business money to reinvest. Don't forget to set aside some for taxes, because that's where a lot of my clients have gotten in trouble, and then they come to me and say, hey, I need to grow really fast because I have to pay this tax bill because I wasn't smart about it when I first got started. So plan financially while you're still employed, because that's the stability that you want to try and carry forward. It's not going to be the same. There's still going to be some instability, but that's what you want to try and carry forward when you ultimately launch your business. The last thing, this is the most fun for me. I don't like talking about finances. The last thing is to put together your launch plan. So let's say you pick March 1st as your date. You've shared it. You've got your deadline. You're like, Brett, I've been accountable. I've been working hard. The last thing that you want to do is have March 1st come around and you be sitting waiting by the phone and crickets. That's the most deflating thing in the world. You put in all this effort. Lay the groundwork for success by coming up with a launch plan that goes from pre-launch to your launch date to several weeks past it to sustain that momentum. I recorded a video, I'll try and link it below, about 6 launch strategies that I've used really successfully. So that might be a good place to start if you're considering a launch. But the key is to maximize the assets that you generate, maximize the momentum that you generate from a launch. You only do it once, so you want to make the most of it. So create a launch plan while you're still employed so that people are building in excitement up to the launch day, have some type of launch on that date, and then have some follow-up promotions afterwards so that you're generating sales while you're still employed. The other thing in your launch plan is include a strategy for how you're going to juggle both jobs, because all of a sudden you launch, hopefully it's successful, you got a great business going, and you still got to go to work in the morning. You don't want to quit the next day. You want to make sure that it's sustainable. So figure out what that new schedule is going to look like and include that in your launch plan as well. I briefly mentioned it, but I also like to include some overlap from your launch day to when you ultimately leave your current job, if that's the plan, just to make sure that you have that stability, you get all the kinks out. I will tell you from experience, it's an interesting transition from the corporate world to business ownership. It's wonderful. It's super rewarding. But it does take some transition. So if you can hang on to that job and juggle both as long as possible, you're going to be that much better off for it. You'll eventually get to the point where your business is taking off and it makes more sense. You're going to make more money if you can invest more time into your business. But if you can go a while from a financial standpoint, that's going to be super rewarding in the end. All right, so to recap quickly, first you're going to give yourself a deadline. Tell people about it. Don't be scared. Then you're going to set a schedule to make sure that you can reach that deadline. Then you are going to create an action-based checklist. Don't just put these big, create an LLC, develop a website, make all my products and services, break them down into task-oriented to-do lists. Then you're going to plan financially, make sure that you're all set when it comes to paying your bills. Don't come back to me and comment and say, Brett, I did all these things and now I'm, in the poorhouse, I'm in debt because I didn't follow your plan financially suggestion. You're going to make connections, use the leverage that you have in your current company to make as many connections to help you be successful. And then finally, you're going to have that launch plan. And like I said, I'll include that link below for the video I did about launch strategies, because I think that'll really help in terms of how you can start to put that plan together and make sure that you're successful. So any questions, as always, you can leave them below in the comments or shoot me an email. It's brett@brettrowley.com. So if you can spell my name, you can get to me. The spelling my name is the tricky part. So again, any questions, just leave them below and I'll link those resources for you. And good luck. I mean, it's a grind, but it's so worth it in the end. If you're thinking about starting a business, I can't encourage you more to just try, because the only downside is the regret. If you try and it doesn't work and you end up liking your corporate job better, that's totally fine. But don't be that person that's 3 years down the road and still talking about the business that they want to start and not having taken any steps forward with it. So good luck. And until next time, I wish you the best.